Hello, everyone, and welcome to DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, but more importantly, the co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our distinguished guest your questions using hashtag DisrupTV, and we'll do our best to answer them during the live broadcast. It is my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wong. He's the founder, CEO of Constellation Research. He's a best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business and a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, Forbes, ZDNet, and in my humble opinion, one of the best futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot, Vala. Another exciting Friday. I'm excited here to be with my co-host, Vala Afshar, and as you all know, one of the chief digital evangelists at Salesforce, but more importantly, one of the top CIO follows, one of the top CMO follows, and of course, a prolific author on Huffington Post with most of what's hot in enterprise. You can follow Vala, and of course, his awesome Twitter feed. So Vala, this is an interesting show. Who do we have to start with here?
It's our pleasure and our honor to have Chuck Ganapathi, the founder and CEO of Tact, as our first guest. Tact's a company on a mission to make enterprise software more human-friendly. Tact transforms the seller experience for Fortune 500 companies like GE and Cisco and Kelly Services by turning a salesperson's connected device into AI-powered smart assistant. How cool is that? We'll talk about that. Chuck has 18 years of CRM experience and was the Senior Vice President of Products at Salesforce, where he led some of the largest product development efforts in the company's history, including the flagship Sales Cloud, Chatter, and mobile products. In addition, Chuck served as GM and developed CRM products at Oracle and Siebel Systems, helping the company transition from client-server platform to the web. He's an awesome follow on Twitter at Chuck Ganapathi, ChuckGanapathi. Welcome, Chuck, to DisrupTV.
Thanks, Vala. I appreciate it.
Hey, Chuck, excellent to have you here. And you guys are doing some very interesting things at Tact. And some of this is as what you kind of describe as systems of augmentation. And in the past, we've talked about systems of engagement, systems of experience. And as we head into this augmentation, tell us a little bit what you mean by systems of augmentation and how's that changing the way we look at work, experiences, and other interactions?
Yeah, Ray, thanks for that question. So if you think about most of us, we're lucky enough to see one solar eclipse in our lifetimes. And you think about platform shifts that are happening, you know, if you're lucky if you see one platform shift. But what's amazing right now is there are two major shifts happening at the same time. One is with regard to edge devices or edge computing, where the fundamental nature of a computer is changing from this, you know, rectangular things with a keyboard and a mouse to everyday objects that are becoming computers. The second major shift is with AI, and that's changing how we fundamentally interact with computers, going from the typical Windows, icons, menus, pointers metaphor to more of a metaphor that's about, you know, using a touch screen on your car to get directions to where you're going, where the map comes back and alerts you if there's a roadblock. Or think about using Facebook Messenger to communicate with your airline to get airline status, or if your flights change, you get notified, or if your credit card is being fraudulently used, you get notified through SMS. Or think about using Alexa and a Cortana at your home or the Google device to play songs that you normally listen to on Spotify. So all of that fundamentally means that the way we're using computers is changing. And if you think about all of those examples, technology has gone from this thing that we use at a discrete point in time at your home, on a laptop or a desktop, to being pervasive in your day-to-day lives. And it's changing the way we interact with them, and it's fundamentally augmenting our day-to-day lives, almost giving us superhuman capability. You think about my 4.5-year-old daughter, she can't read or write yet, but she knows how to use her voice and ask Alexa to play, you know, Let It Go from Frozen, right? So that is now technology giving us superhuman capability. So that's kind of what we mean by systems of augmentation.
In how many languages in Frozen as well? I'm just kidding.
There's many versions of Frozen on YouTube.
Yes, there are.
Ray and I, a couple of weeks ago, had the good fortune of talking to Walt Mossberg in person, and we talked to him about his, I don't know if it's a word he coined, but he talked about ambient computing. Yeah. And the fact that you will gain insights from objects and things all around you, and you're not tethered to a PC or a desk or a laptop or a tablet. And with the combination of artificial intelligence and Internet of Things and sensors and devices that are connected. You recently talked about, in terms of the only way of being a successful company if you fundamentally do two things. You said, one, get salespeople to want to use technology, not be forced to. And two, build an architecture and technology vision that starts with the person and then works outwards from there, as opposed to with the technology and more specifically a database. And so this leans towards kind of digitization of workflow and being able to, in a frictionless way, deliver insights and perhaps use voice as the new UI. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So a lot of our customers, GE, you mentioned a few, GE, Cisco, ABB, Medtronic, all of them are on this journey, and I'm sure you've seen this, Vala, while as a part of Salesforce, is they're all thinking about, what does digital transformation mean for my company? Mm-hmm. And typically most CIOs and digital officers start by thinking, how can I transform my experience with my customers? And how can I digitally transform my customer experience? But I always say, digitally transforming a customer experience has to start with you first, and how your own employees, who are the ones that are interacting with customers on a day-to-day basis, what is their experience like? And how does that translate and permeate into the way they interact with their customers? So I think you're right. Digital transformation is happening all over. And this shift that we talked about, as Walt calls it ambient computing, or Peter Levine at Andreessen Horowitz calls edge computing, or Satya at Microsoft calls the intelligent edge, is this idea that now technology is with us all day long, is following us all day long as we go about our daily lives. And you think about the example that Peter Levine gives about edge computing. He says that you can think of your self-driving car, we're all going to be driving self-driving cars very soon. You can think of that as a data center on wheels, right? And if you think about a self-driving car driving on El Camino Real, and there's a stop sign, and it takes a picture of an image of the stop sign. If it has to go all the way back to the cloud and tries figure out that, oh, that's a stop sign, the car's going to overrun it. So you have to make that decision. You have to use artificial intelligence at the edge to know that you're about to run a stop sign or run over a person, and be able to control the control systems of the car right then and there. And that, I think, is where the change is happening. And to me, what that means for a salesperson, which is what our company is all about, living and breathing the lives of salespeople. If you think about salespeople, the technology that we've been giving them over the last 20 years, and I'm guilty of this because I worked at Siebel back in the day, and Salesforce more recently. If you think about most of the technology we give them, it still forms on a database, right? Oh, yeah. The database is important. Don't get me wrong. The company needs to know, who are my customers, who are my salespeople talking to, what's my pipeline look like. We need all of that information. But the user experience to the salesperson that has to use this system hasn't changed in 20 years, right? It's still the same forms on database. We're still treating our salespeople, who arguably are some of the most valuable employees of the company because they drive revenue, as data entry robots. But that makes no sense to me whatsoever. So that's really where I think the opportunity is, where we can fundamentally change how these people do their jobs every day. So if you could just imagine, just like you have Alexa, that's changed the way you control the systems in your house, whether it's your speakers, your TV, or you're opening your door. Think about if you could have a digital assistant for a salesperson that's doing the things that a salesperson would want. Anybody would want that, which is like, don't make me do the manual data entry work, like updating my CRM, take away the grunt work. Tap me on my shoulder to tell me about insights, whether it's a customer that might be churning or a potential upsell opportunity, or remove the friction in how the deal team works together, between my sales engineer and the marketer and all the other people that are helping me close the deal, including the legal people. Remove friction in the way we talk and communicate with each other so we can get deals done faster. I think that's where the power is of taking that general change that's happening in our personal lives and applying it to a very specific domain like sales.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that we've noticed as well, we just published something on when to automate with AI. There are a couple categories of things that just pop up, right? How repetitive something is, what the volume of information is, how complex it is, the time to completion, nodes of interaction, creativity, physical presence. How do you guys look at this? Like, what flows do you start with to say, hey, look, this might be an easier way to augment humanity, do some augmentation, and really change the way we look at digitalization of workflows?
I think we're at the start of a 10-year journey. And anybody that tells you that AI is going to replace all of our jobs in the next 5 years doesn't know what they're talking about, right? So it's an eventuality that is for certain, but we're in very early stages of it.
So don't worry about it if you've got retirement for the next 5 to 10 years. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And so, but even then, where I think the biggest, I honestly think that the biggest impact is going to be how AI helps us do our jobs. What I say, give us superhuman capability, right? And that's what we want. And I think that's what AI can do for us. But let's be realistic, right? We're early in this journey. There are very few companies that truly understand AI. Everybody talks about it. There's a lot of hype around it. But these are some really hard problems and that have been around for 20 years. I studied AI 25 years ago in graduate school, right? It's not a new field. What's different now is that we now have the compute infrastructure to make it more scalable and repeatable. We have these devices that are, they have speakers, they have cameras, they have these sensors where AI can actually do something with it. So it's very easy to kind of think about the automation scenarios. I think you're right. I think automation of manual repetitive tasks is a no-brainer, especially when it comes to manual repetitive tasks that involve me having to do the grunt work of, like I said, being a data entry robot to record information into a system, right? Whether it's a CRM system or an ERP system to input orders or an expense reporting system. I think those kinds of manual repetitive tasks where there's a clear set of data that you're operating on. So these systems of record, what they look like, what the schemas are, and computers are very good at talking to other computers, right? So if you can create this AI that sits on top of these systems of record that have well understood schemas, that have well understood published APIs, they're fantastic at operating on top of that. But the second thing you need to complete that cycle is you have to create an AI that also can understand me, what I say as a human being. And I think that's where, with natural language processing and with conversational platforms that can support multi-turn dialogues, that's very important. And that's, again, we're very early in that stage. And I think not enough is being talked about. We hear a lot about prediction, predicting outcomes of, which deal is going to close or which customer is an important customer, trying to make smarter decisions than we can. I think that's a great use case for AI, but I think the use case for AI that I get excited about, because it helps a salesperson, helps me as a professional every day, is make the computer understand what I want, understand my intent, and go fulfill it.
Sure. We recently had a CEO of a Boston-based startup that's in the fundraising philanthropy space, and they're using machine learning to automatically create a very rich, context-rich, personalized emails that can be sent to donors. And there's a probability score in terms of which donors to contact in which order. And they're seeing 10x improvement in acquisition, retention, and ultimately donations based on, again, using machine learning in the donation space. So pretty exciting space. It's also exciting to hear Andrew, Nick talk about Stanford, 1,200 undergraduates signed up for machine learning classes. So I just spoke at my school, and 20 years ago was my last grad school, and I think I was taking Fortran at the time. So pretty awesome that undergrads are taking machine learning. Can you expand on this conversational AI as the new UI, and what you foresee the positive impact in terms of improving sales productivity? Take us to a sales experience maybe 3 to 5 years from now. How is it different from today?
You know, when we do this, when we work with our customers, we actually produce these videos that we call Day in the Life of a Seller. And we kind of reimagine for them, you know, here's what I do today, and here's what it can look like with this kind of technology. And I don't think that's 3 to 5 years away. It's here now, and we're making it happen for these very, very large customers. So I think that part of the technology we know how to do, and the science for that exists today. And so you think about typical day of a salesperson. It involves me talking to customers. And the only way a salesperson makes money is if I spend time in front of a customer, right? Not in front of my computer, not in front of my CRM system. And it's all about how am I interacting with my customer. And I may be interacting with them, you know, over email. That's fine. I may be calling them.
But you're engaged.
But you're engaging them. You know, it's whether it's an in-person meeting or whatever. So if you think about that day in the life, what we expect most of our sales professionals to do is to go do your job, which is selling, which is interacting with customers. But then at the end of the day, I got to go home. I got to tell my spouse, hey, honey, I need another half an hour because I have to get into you know, my system of record, my company's CRM system, and I got to re-record all of those things that have to happen. Well, that makes no sense. So I think there's a great opportunity to use conversational interfaces right in my day-to-day workflow so I can capture that activity automatically. 2 things you have to do to make that happen. Number 1, this conversational AI has to have access to my context, right? Context is very important. Where am I? Who am I meeting? What is the history that we have with that customer? What is my location? And all of these are things that the AI can understand from existing sources of data. So whether it's your email conversations to know, okay, this is the email history you have with the customer. Looking at your calendar to know, oh, you're meeting with Bala at Enterasys. Looking at your LinkedIn profile to say, okay, Ray Wang worked at this other company before, so you can have a warm conversation. Right. All of these systems already exist, but it's about using a conversational interface to bring all of that together and give it to me in a very consumable form at the time I need it. So, you know, there's a ton of insights that companies generate. There's a ton of data that companies have about customers. Yeah. The problem is it's too much information. It's information overload. What if you could just give me just what I need to know, the silver bullets about my customer, the competitor that I'm fighting, you know, the product capabilities that are most relevant to them, give it to me as silver bullets right before I meet with the customer. That's far more valuable. And I think that drives a lot of productivity.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we call that AI as the new UX, one of the things that we've been talking about with clients. Yeah. We're here with Chuck Ganapathi, founder and CEO of Tact. Tact is one of the Constellation Shortlist winners this year for sales productivity. Thanks for being on the show. You can follow Chuck at Chuck Ganapathi and Tact_AI if you want to know more what's going on and changing the way sales is happening. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Chuck,
thanks, Ray. Thanks, Vala. Good talking to you.
Yeah, cool. Chuck is super smart. And I met him several years ago as he was doing his magic at Salesforce. So really, really bright CEO, and you know, definitely follow him on Twitter for great insights. So this is all about bringing super smart CEOs and learning from them. And our second guest is no exception. Will Hayes is CEO of LucidWorks. Will became CEO of LucidWorks in 2014 and has over 15 years of product, marketing, and business development experience. LucidWorks delivers AI-powered search applications that wow customers, empower employees, and improve business results. We're going to have Will tell us more about LucidWorks. Prior to LucidWorks, he was the head of technical business development at Splunk, where he was responsible for defining the company's market category and key product feature set. He's another great follow on Twitter at I am Will Hayes. I love that. I am Will. IAM WILLHAYES. Welcome, Will, to DisrupTV.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
This is awesome. Intro. Hey, thanks for being on the show. You know, the stuff that you guys do there actually really improves how people interact, and you basically have a lot of things that you do really well. And so the question is, you know, we always talk about this topic of enterprise search, and we take it for granted. right? But what do people really want out of enterprise search? Companies, organizations, individuals, like what's the main thing out of this?
The great question. And I got to say, I mean, Chuck didn't steal my thunder. He served up the perfect setup for the way that we think about data and sort of the relationship of people and that. And I heard you said that that UX, AI is the new UX. In our world, we actually think of, data is the new UX, and, how we drive these experiences really comes from setting the context and sort of mapping the data and really the information behind the content to that user's intention. Enterprise search, it's one of those terms that we absolutely hate. There's just no one sits back and says, wow, my enterprise search deployment or project. But, you said it, it's incredibly important. What we like to look at is what is the goal within the organization, because the organization's got all of the information and it's stored in a variety of different formats. And, the age-old sort of big data cliche, it's getting faster, it's getting bigger. And, these things are in fact happening. What we try to look for is action. How do we determine the most accurate piece of information for any given user? This could be a customer, this could be a prospect, this could be somebody, sitting behind a support desk trying to resolve an issue and get to the next customer. And so there's a variety of techniques that we deploy around understanding users' intent, processing user behavior, using lots of clustering and machine learning algorithms to really determine the importance of any bit of data or any bit of content for a given user. And I think that's sort of the next generation of enterprise search. And people will call this cognitive. You've got Gartner's definition of insight engines. But to me, it's really about how do we deliver actionable information and get away from this idea of 10 blue links, search box, and have it go to the third page of things that make sense. And I hate to use the term, but to really sort of Amazonify those experiences within these enterprise applications. And if you think about, just the evolution of users, particularly in tech, which is now a really long time ago, I remember that if you were a senior director or somebody, you had folks who would come in and print your calendar every morning. I mean, the need to interact with technology was so low.
I miss those days, man. My Franklin planner.
Well, now, I've got my mother following me on Twitter, right? And so suddenly your average person is interacting with technology and these experiences in such a rich way that you get to work and you're wondering, wait a minute, my Netflix and my Google and my Facebook providing me with these very productive information or data experiences, yet I'm sitting here sifting through, my corporate information corpus. And so we're trying to really bridge that gap and leveraging a lot of the techniques that were talked about earlier. If you think about search technology, context of Google and Amazon and the way that we've experienced it over the last decade, I mean, this is really the cutting edge in terms of that information processing as it relates to AI. And, our bigger vision is that not only are we helping create productivity within these enterprise and retail applications, but we can ultimately serve as the smart data store that can go back and power all of these initiatives that are coming through Internet of Things and automation. And, at the end of the day, you need to know which way to turn, and that's the content.
Sure. Well, when you mentioned Amazon, or when I think of Netflix or Spotify or Amazon or any of these successful apps that are powered by AI and machine learning and have this anticipatory capability of knowing what we need and recommending next steps. What excites you in this space? Is it the velocity and the speed and direction in which we're heading, and we've experienced, and what the future might be for folks in the enterprise that can now leverage search to really guide them in the most optimal way of getting their job fast and satisfying their customers and having efficiency and all the goodness that we hope for when we begin that search journey?
Well, to me, and again, we take perspective of looking up. We're out here in the trenches trying to solve this data challenge and then seeing all the crazy, amazing things that our customers are doing and partners and folks that are out here in the Valley and within the greater ecosystem. And we find that really exciting. I think for me, just being the data nerd I am, What I find most exciting about the world we're in now is the evolution of telemetry data. There's so much that we can capture, whether it's about our employees' behavior, different offices that you heard Chuck earlier about your calendar and your email, and all of this information that we can now process. And if you go outwards thinking about your consumer or your prospect and all of the signals that they're dropping and the way they browse your website and the way they get to you, the SEO, the interaction, the social media. And so from our perspective as data folks, we're excited because we have so much more information that we can glean context from. And really, that's how we start to set that productive path, right? Because we're able to start the process through machine learning and understand patterns that help us anticipate what a user's desire is or what a user's intention is at any given point in time. And then through relevancy rating and other weighting algorithms that we use, we take the intention, and that's what we think most important piece of information for you. And I like that word, Stephen Emmett from Gartner will talk about this word information, because it's not data, it's not content that we care about, it's the information that I can actually do something with. Right. And so the more of the telemetry data that we collect, our customers are starting to really pay attention to, and we encourage them, look at every mouse click, look at every log file, look at every badge swipe, because that signal data is what's going to really enhance the way that you leverage or gain insight from all of the information that you have within an app.
Makes sense.
Yeah. No, this makes a lot of sense. And what we're seeing is really this move from data to decisions, right? How do we take that data, get it to information flows, align those information flows, figure out patterns of insight, and then take action on them. And one of the biggest drivers in helping to do that, for whatever reason, is voice, right? We talk about AI being the new UX getting you there. Alexa, please buy 20,000 copies of Disrupting Digital Business. Check out right now. Now I've just become a bestseller again. No, anyways, sorry for all those folks who echoes have just gone off. But my point being is that we now have this situation where we expect that kind of reaction. you just figured it out, right? You get this kind of reaction. Why such a big push to voice, right? Why was that that last piece that got people to understand what this meant?
Well, I think it's funny because we get a lot of questions about voice from our clients, and we have support for various voice plugins and things. What I think about is, voice is just yet another input, right? Whether it's a swipe, whether it's an entry, or it's a location that's going to trigger something. What's more interesting to me in the context of voice is the natural language piece of it. It's not necessarily that, talking to a device, we've had speech to text and these things. It's the fact that I'm talking to like I'm talking to a person. For me, wanting to know what time is the Giants game, right? That's a very specific intention that I've set out to, retrieve a very specific piece of information. And traditionally, Giants schedule games to determine which one looks the most interesting and engage. Well, now, the expectation has shifted towards answers. And so, voice just being yet another paradigm, obviously, I think people are just doing too much work in their car, frankly, and so they want to interact with their hands free. I know that, for myself and trying to, I'm a big cook at home, and the number of devices that I've ruined by having messy hands and all that kind of good stuff. But again, I think ultimately what users are really getting after is more of a natural interaction with the data. And again, this goes back to classification, experimentation, capturing signal information and ranking those.
But the power, right? You're right. The power is not just the fact that it's an interface. The power is the NLP, the ontologies, breaking it down, right? Being able to figure out, micro segments of intent or taking context and applying it to that conversation at that point in time. For you, it's a data trove, right? You're capturing insights and intent that you couldn't have captured before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the hard part, right? Everybody's walking Jeopardy and they've got these crazy expectations. And I can't tell you the number of CEOs and CIOs that I talk to that they, day one, let's get a chatbot. And again, there are some very manual.
I saw the demo at a conference.
Yeah, it looked great, right? Yeah. I think there's more AI companies running on if-then statements than actual NLP and deep learning, but that's a separate conversation. But it's I always draw a continuum, right? That look, there's an adoption continuum, and you can accelerate through investment, but there's a lot of training, there's a lot of feedback that goes into refining these systems. Google's not just Google overnight. We are all kind to provide of signals and data points that they can continually experiment and refine with, that gives us that experience. Enterprise or Fortune 1000 company X has a little bit of catch-up to do before they can get to that same point. But that's why we encourage this idea of telemetry data and what they can think about to kind of accelerate the adoption and the success of those deployments.
Sure. Well, when you look at your customer base, which line of business is most engaged and championing the optimization of search capabilities and bringing that data-driven or information-driven mindset into the business? Is it marketing? Is it customer service and support? Is it sales? How active are CEOs in the conversation? I want to better understand, who you connect with, and why do you think it's what's the reason for that line of business, championing bringing more intelligence into the enterprise?
Great question. And, it's interesting. I mean, we joke and we talked earlier about enterprise search. And again, wherever there's enterprise search in a large company, there's somebody who's just had some really tough years behind them. And they're just trying to keep the lights on. And obviously, we have opportunities to come in and sort of accelerate that. But that's more of a blocking and tackling. I think the folks that are looking forward, a lot of this is coming out of customer service, customer experience. The customer service is, one of those areas has two metrics that are incredibly important. The first one is just simply case deflection. Start to provide, we've got all this knowledge, we've got all this information. Service Cloud's been an interesting play for us because now we're tying into the CRMs and we're doing some really interesting. But the more that we can provide, again, that natural resolution to customers in a non-frustrating way, it's better for the business. It's a huge cost saver. So there's a true kind of revenue impact there. On the other side, though, customer, it's interesting. We work with a financial services institution within wealth management, and one of their competitive advantages is always going to be the technology and tools that they provide back to their wealth managers. Because if those folks leave, that whole book of business is going to go follow, right? And so they're heavily invested in honing those experiences and getting to more chatbot and next best action. And so, as a member of this organization, I feel like I have the tools necessary to best serve my customers. So even those internal customers become more and more important. And I'll go back to my earlier point. Your expectations have risen so dramatically, and so there's a reason why, you come to a website that maybe doesn't do a lot of digital commerce and you're thinking like, what the heck? I can't find anything. This makes no sense. Where's the accessories to go with this? The same thing happens at work. I know the answer's there. Why am I having to jump through all these hoops? Why can't I simply just interact the way I would with something like a Google, something like a Siri? And so that customer service just will understand the value. It's easy to get people behind it. I could do some really great things around enterprise search and make it cognitive and make it smart, and people will go, wow, that's really cool, but I've got 24 other fires that I need to go fight. And an obvious one, but we serve some of the largest retailers in the world, and retail has always been, I would say, on the cutting edge of data discovery. And I don't think they get enough credit for the innovation that's gone on and the ability to, upsell, cross-sell, omni-channel market. And it's coming from a true data science perspective that's been refined really for almost 15 years. And so we take the lead from the people we see like Amazon and what they're able to do, and we try to bring those capabilities back into other smaller retailers, and it's been quite successful. And so in those two use cases, it's a no-brainer. And then you've got the more visionary folks when it comes to their data that really see search as a way to intersect a wide variety of data sources, bring those sources back to data then for analytics, because at the end of the day, that's rows and columns. I can do my visualization, I can do my analysis, and so that requires a certain sophistication within an organization. We do see it, and we see it increasing, but it's not as clear cut as when I can come in and say I can reduce call volume by 30%. I mean, everybody understands that metric and what that means.
Right. And sorry, you mentioned industries. So customer service and support is the leading line of business within the enterprise. Which industry is leading this revolution of becoming smarter in terms of how they anticipate needs and deliver?
So financial services, definitely. Always wanting to make smarter decisions, always wanting to provide, better services. I think, the churn rates that happen in areas like wealth management can be very impactful. And so again, combating that with a customer experience is important. The other area where we see a lot more of this innovation happening is around telco and what they're trying to do, shift through lots of acquisitions kind of coming together, lots of digital transformation happening. And so for us, those are probably two of our highest performing verticals. I treat retail a little bit separate because there the mission is slightly different. And we have a special team that we deploy can interface on those deals, and they represent a significant amount of revenue for us. But the financial services of the telco, where I can point to the most deployments and the rapid iteration and very lofty goals in terms of where they want to get their business to from a data and digital. One metric I like to use is for every 10 employees in a company, we've got one system. Some of these telcos at 50, 60, 100,000 people are trying to manage just abundance of data sources. It doesn't have to be that much data, but the fact that I've got it sitting in 500 different places through a half a dozen acquisitions and going into different international theaters, it creates a challenge, and the need to leverage that information to stay competitive and to stay agile is critical.
Makes sense.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. So hey, you've gone from this crazy open source search project from Lucene to Solar to now this fusion architecture that you guys are doing on the back end. What do you look to in terms of leadership, in terms of building? You're a CEO, and who are your mentors? Like who the folks do you look to kind of guide you through that transition? Like you're open source, you're a startup, you're moving to the next level. Who's some of your heroes? Let's go with that.
It's a great question. It's funny. I'm not what you would call an open source guy. If you look at my background,
no, you're not.
I mean, I was
not.
Yeah. So I was part of the founding team at Funk, which is a complete we're in the Maserati dealer over here, dealing with software that's out there for free. And so when I came to Lucid, you had to earn some credibility. Luckily, I can still write code and I know what I'm talking about, and so that's an easy way to kind of warm into that community. But the reality is that I'm just such a fan of technology. I grew up here in the Bay Area, in the East Bay, in Richmond, and just have seen the transformation that has happened in the Bay Area and the things that have happened over the last 30 years. And so I always love things that are fast, things that are distributed, solving these hard problems. And so, Splunk definitely presented a challenge to go do that. This was 2005, right? There was no Lucene available. I mean, there was some early versions of things. And so coming to it, really what it was about to me was, hey, we've got, and this thing is the most scalable, the most battle-tested platform out there, but there's an opportunity to bring this level of intelligence to data. And these are really hard challenges, and they're things that I have not seen done effectively outside of thin like places like Amazon or Google. And so when Grant, who's the co-founder here, and I got together, it was really about this shared vision of, okay, how do we take all of this stuff we know how to do, because we search experts for so long, and let's create a product that can start to consume. And so that was sort of the transformation that we took the company through. And from a mentor perspective, I wish I could say I've seen this done so many times before. There's people who I greatly admire and had a chance to even meet at one point, like Jim Whitehurst. I was very fortunate at Splunk to join the company when we were less than 10 people, worked very closely with the founders, Eric Swan, Rob Das, Michael Baum, who continue to provide guidance and support for me. And then when Godfrey Sullivan came in as well. And so, I think a lot of my network and a lot of my inspiration comes from outside of this ecosystem. But really, I think that's also what sort of helps, because I bring a different perspective around software and around the market, versus sort of the Apache kind of perspective, which I've learned to really appreciate, and just the community around that and the energy around that is great. And so marrying those two things, I think, is important. At another time, happy to talk. We have an entire methodology about how we think about community versus commercialization and maintaining a harmony there. It's something that's really important to us, just as a culture. We really care. And so, yeah, no, we take it very seriously, but it's just been a ton of fun. And like I said, I mean, the thing I love to appreciate from Open Source is you got all these folks that you share something with, whether they're on your team, in your company. You know, I can go anywhere in the world. I can meet up with committers. We have this sort of shared passion, and you don't find that anywhere else.
That's awesome.
Feeling the love. Will Hayes, CEO of LucidWorks. Twitter handle, follow him. I am Will Hayes.
Appreciate it.
You can follow him at LucidWorks. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for sharing your passion and, of course, your insights.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks, Paula.
Thanks. Have a good weekend. Wow.
Looks
like he's loving his job, doesn't it? Ray, that sounds like he loves what he's doing. So
yeah, I think he hates his job, actually. No, you can feel the passion. It's amazing.
Yeah, no kidding.
It just comes accrued. Talking about passionate individuals, who do we have next?
This is the cleanup hitter spot. So we are very fortunate to have returning guest Ron Miller, who's the enterprise reporter at TechCrunch. He's been a technology journalist since 1998. He started when he was 5. In addition, Ron is a contributing editor to eContent magazine, where he writes the Media Rocks column. Ron launched and still runs the blog socialmedianews.com. He loves being the last guest on DisrupTV. He's an incredible follow on Twitter. Seriously, we only invite people that are good on Twitter at Ron_Miller, MILLER. And he's a future first ballot Hall of Fame inductee to DisrupTV. So welcome, Ron.
I want to say one thing before we start with the questions. I'm glad I had my Echo unplugged, because otherwise I'd have a truckload of Ray's books coming.
Darn. I keep trying this.
He does that every other show, and I think he's continuing to be a bestseller because of it. So.
Don't tell anyone that secret. I don't want to tell my publicist that either.
The other thing is that, I was trying. I told you I knew the first guest, but I also knew Will. And I just spoke to him a few weeks ago about they had done a big project with Reddit, to do their search to read.
Oh yeah.
And so I had just spoken to Will, I don't know, like a month ago, and I didn't put it together until he started talking. But both those guys, I'm writing about both those guys. So.
There's no surprise that anyone that's doing anything in AI will eventually cross paths with you, because Ray and I looked at your recent blogs, Ron. Let's see. Zoom brings AI and AR to meeting. Salesforce Ventures launches $50 million to fund encouraging AI development. Splunk expands machine learning. Google adds support with NVIDIA. Aptus is putting artificial intelligence to work. Microsoft, you are like the AI go-to guy for news.
I know. Like one of those things that is really hot, right? So, I mean.
And what's great is this is not clickbait. This isn't like Experian meets NFL on the line of Taylor Swift on a new iPhone 8. And it's amazing. I mean, this is real stuff. So where do we want to go first? Where do you want to go first? Do you want to go with Zoom and AR? What's hot? What's going on right now?
Well, I mean, the Zoom story was interesting. Zoom's an interesting company anyway.
We are thinking about moving to Zoom. If anyone on Zoom's on there, listen up, because we're having lots of trouble with what we're using right now.
Well, this is what happens when you use it free stuff. But no offense, guys. Zoom is sitting in a very competitive space. They have Blue Jean, they have GoToMeeting, then they have Eric's former company, the CEO of Zoom, WebEx. They have these guys. They have Google Teams and Workplace by Facebook, all working and trying to be the meeting software. Right? It seems like it's a big space and there's a lot of room. But Zoom has been updating their product, and they came out with some stuff this week that was pretty interesting. One was, as you say, adding artificial intelligence in a very pronounced way to create the transcripts from the meeting. So it identifies who the speaker is, and then I haven't seen it, so I don't know how well it works. But the working theory is it identifies the speaker. It does a a pretty good transcription, and then you have a transcription afterwards, and you don't have to have somebody who's assigned to do the meeting notes. So from that perspective, it's pretty cool, right? I know I could use something like that sometimes when I'm on the phone, and I'm just talking to somebody who speaks really quickly, and I'm taking my notes as fast as I can, and I was like, geez, wouldn't it be great to put AI to work on this problem for journalists? And nobody's done it yet, but I'm sure that there are going to be tools that come out sooner or later. And then the other thing that they did that's pretty cool is introducing virtual reality to the meeting experience. So it requires the presenter be wearing I think it's from Meta, the company Meta, helmet, and then whatever the presenter is seeing in virtual reality, the participants see without any helmet. So it just requires the one piece of special equipment. And the use case that they were talking about was for online courses. So a teacher could present something like, say, the galaxy, and be walking through the Milky Way, and the students would see that whatever the teacher was seeing in virtual reality. So a pretty cool use case. Again, I think these things are very much on the edge. The fact that they went with just one manufacturer's helmet is because it was just like something to get going with. Sure. And but I think we're going to see all of these guys start to dabble in all of this stuff and see the meeting experience get better and better online.
Sure. Because of the show, because of DisrupTV, Ray and I have the good fortune of talking to a lot of startup founders, executives in public companies that are working on AI-powered solutions. The Constellation Connect Enterprise plus Dreamforce alone will expose us to many, many more leaders in this space. So how do folks that are really trailblazers when it comes to AI, how do they reach you, Ron? Or what's your sorting algorithm in terms of making sense of, right now I think there's 1,950 startups in AI space that have fetched 23 billion in VC funding. How do you decide your articles and conferences and who you're going to meet when there's so much going on in this space? Ray and I, we just invite them to DisrupTV and we get to meet them at different events. I want to know your algorithm, your sorting algorithm.
Well, the two guys you had on today, like I said, I've interviewed them in the past, and whatever it was, their public relations people, pitched me, and they were compelling enough storylines, product lines that they caught my attention, and I can tell you that I get tons of if you want to know the process, I get tons of pitches every day.
What do you look for? What do you look for specifically?
Well, I wish I could say that there was like one thing that I knew what to look for, but I could tell you that like what you guys just came out with this this new artificial intelligence thing that sorts through salespeople's emails and kind of brings stuff up to the surface. I wish I had something like that, but I have all I help you
with that.
All I have is my own instinct. So what I do is, I can't say definitively what it is that calls my attention, but there are certain things that automatically get filtered out for whatever reason. They're just not things that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in, unless it's like a rock star personnel changes. I'm not usually interested in studies that are vendor sponsored. If you're listening out there.
So this is his new way of filtering his inbox. I'm sending you these pitches, but don't have my name in it.
That's right. If it says Ray sent me, then I immediately open it.
All right, I made the cut.
Ron, you don't have to say that. We love you. We're always going to have you back on the show, so you don't have to say it.
But it's like, it's not like everything that has the word AI in it is going to, get my attention. But, there are certain things that, Zoom wasn't just pitching me AI. They were pitching me that, they had their first user conference, and this was the first significant update since their $100 million funding earlier this year, which I had covered. So that kind of was like, it had that kind of connection. Sure. And so It depends. You know, like the Aptus one I thought was particularly interesting. It was adding AI and machine learning to the legal process, the contract process, which is something that, you know, is ripe for disruption.
Sure.
You know, so it's something that, you know, when you look at it, it's not just like because it's becoming like everybody is doing AI. You have to, right?
Sure.
Every startup that's going to come out down the pike now is going to have artificial intelligence underpinnings. It's like being in the cloud. It just is, right? It's not anything exciting or unusual.
You're raising a great point that AI is table stakes at the marketing level. But what gets your attention? Like, what gets your attention when someone says, "Hey, I have AI"? Like, prove it. Like, what's the part of it that says, "Here's what's interesting to you"?
Well, I mean, I think it has to be something that I maybe haven't seen before, or you know, attacking a problem that I think needs to be attacked. So
the use case.
I saw a thing this morning, a blog post this morning on blockchain, and blockchain. The person's point was, blockchain is a solution. Now, what's the problem, right? You know, and I mean, I think, you know, you have to be attacking a problem that needs attacking, and not just throwing some sort of technology at a situation to say you did, you know.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, when they talk about AI use cases with you, are you interested in, for example, with intersection of other emerging technologies like Internet of Things, or perhaps blockchain? Is it, as you said, is it a profile of the folks that are developing the technology? I ask all of this because we do have a ton of startup founders that are reaching out to Ray and I, wanting to share their story. And I think over time, Ray and I also have to find ways to refine how we invite guests, because we're getting inundated with folks who want to share their story. And unfortunately, we can only have 3 guests a week. So
every 2 weeks it's me, so that's fun.
We're just going to read your blogs and go after the folks you profile. That's it. That's what we're going to do.
Well, hey, now here's the interesting thing that just came through the wires about a few hours this morning. As I was reading it, the UN, artificial intelligence could destabilize the world through unemployment and war. Did you see that? This is the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robots that the UN has just opened up. And it's with the headquarters in The Hague. And basically what they've been talking about is the fact that they're scared, right? They're scared that, you know, someone's going to come up with AI and take over the world. So I don't know. Are you seeing those kind of things pick up as well?
A few weeks ago, you know, Vladimir Putin said that the country that controls AI will control the world, or something like that. Yeah. I think what it comes down to is that nobody is going to control AI. You know, I mean, AI isn't a thing like nuclear warheads. You know, that you use, like a handful of countries have figured out how to create nuclear missiles. AI is much more amorphous than that, right? It's a set of technologies, and it's an evolving set of technologies. It's not this static thing like I can build a nuclear weapon, now I have this power. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around that because of that, and there's a lot of misperceptions being portrayed, you know, by certain people like Elon Musk and others, who are saying, you know, perpetuating this fear. And you know, and I have great respect for Elon Musk. Obviously, he's doing some great work as a you know, an innovator and as an entrepreneur. And you know, I would love to own one of his cars. But, you know, and even his solar panel, you know, solar tiles for the roof. I mean, I think the ideas the guy comes up with is just amazing. But you know, I wrote an article, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. We did a whole day on AI at MIT. TechCrunch did, and I was there, and I did a couple of things. And you know, I spoke to a lot of really smart people like Rodney Brooks, who's one of the guys who started you know, iRobot, and you know, and he has his own a new company now. And you know, these people were saying, like, you know, what these guys don't understand, that are, first of all, he says, most of the people who are creating these perceptions and, you know, and making these pronouncements are people who don't work in AI. You know, so as smart as Elon Musk is, as smart as Stephen Hawking is, as smart as a lot of the people who are, creating this kind of fear around this, then they're not working, and they don't. His point was they don't realize how hard it is. How hard it is to get anything done, and and I mean, like if you project out 20 years and then 40 years and then 100 years, there's going to be things that are going to be done differently, but the process takes a long time. And I, one of the things that bugs me is we'll hear something like, oh, so-and-so did something in a lab where they got AI to do this, and you think, like, well, there goes another, 50 million jobs, but just because you can do it in a lab,
right?
That's one step. You guys know to scale to take an idea, productize it, put it out in the world, scale it, and make it, something that can be applied over and over again and repeated.
Right.
It's a huge amount of work and doesn't always work. What they did in the lab doesn't always work. And, Andrew McAfee and Eric Prolston, who are a couple of MIT professors who wrote some really good books on this,
sure.
They did an article that was, I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, maybe 3-4 months ago. And if you look it up and find it, it's an excellent overview of where we are, And I think like everybody who's like, the UN guys should read that article, because it's like, it's a very realistic view of what AI can do and what it can't do. And I think we have to do more education around that. And every time I write an article that kind of pushes back against that, because, I tend to be contrary anyway, but
no, you do. So,
but
you had Andrew.
You have to present a realistic picture, and I think people are too often presenting this picture that it's just going to take jobs, and none of the stuff that you guys were talking about earlier with these other founders, that it's not necessarily about that. Certainly not now.
Yeah.
It's more about augmenting human beings than replacing human beings.
Yeah, no, we look at augmented humanity as a big thing.
Yeah.
Now, hey, we're doing something with our cleanup hitter guests every week, and this is the new thing. It's called Tweet of the Week. What was the one tweet that stood out to you this week, and why? Was it the three former presidents at the golf range? Was it what was the one? What was the one that took you?
I have TweetDeck open all day long, and I don't have one that sticks out in my mind right now. There are so many, and there's so many things that make you shake your head, and so many things that make you say, I never want to be on Twitter again. And then there are things like, oh, this is why I'm on Twitter. So,
are you using 280 characters yet?
I am not. I have not been given that. But if you want to chat about that for a sec, I've been on Twitter since 2008.
Wow.
pretty early on.
Wow.
And,
we were talking to nobody, right? We're just talking to ourselves on Twitter.
Back then, that was when like people were saying what bagels they had for breakfast. Nobody knew what to do with it, right? And now it's like this thing. I was
like Periscope. Check out my pizza shop. No, wait. What about that guy?
It was I Ray's book. So I tweeted the other day because I was talking kind of a few tweets about this 280 character thing, and I said, back in 2009, I remember going out to dinner with friends and having to explain to them what Twitter was, and they're like, what is it? And I'm like, well, it's this broadcast medium and it's one to many, I'm like trying to explain it to them. And you think back, you come now, 8 years later, and like, who doesn't know what Twitter is? The president is all over Twitter, so everybody knows what Twitter is now. But I remember broadcasters, like, so do you tweet, Bill? Oh no!
Are you using the tweet? Are you using the tweet? So we are here with Ron Miller, enterprise reporter on TechCrunch, one of the top AI folks. Remember to pitch him hard, pitch him fast, but don't pitch him with junk. You can follow him on Twitter at RON_Miller, and hopefully we see you at the Constellations Connected Enterprise on the 24th through 27th. So we will see you there for one of the top tech conferences of the world. So hey, thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for being on the show. Who do we have next week, Vala, on show number, I think it's 82, is it?
82. Ray, we're getting close to 200 guests on DisrupTV. And again, thanks, Ron. He's always amazing. If either one of us are ever not available, I know who we're going to go to as a substitute co-host. Next week, Ray, it's all about education. So we're going to have Corey Snow from Harvard University. Corey is responsible for all of the enterprise software CRM deployments at Harvard, and he's an amazing thought leader, and you're going to enjoy listening to Corey. We have Rachel Clemens, Chief Information Officer at Davidson College, and Rachel will talk about digital disruption and transformation in higher ed. And then we have another amazing Hall of Fame first ballot DisrupTV, Heather Clancy, Editorial Director of Green Biz Group. Heather always brings a perspective, a culmination of different emerging technologies, all in the converged space of smart cities, smart buildings, and green business. So if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. This is where people come to share their experiences with us, and we thank you for watching. Hope to see you next week.
Everyone.
Thanks, Ray.
Take care.